The record shows, and what it reveals changes everything. This is a dramatized political commentary narrative told from the perspective of the speaker, and it should be treated as an opinionated retelling rather than a statement of verified fact. Adam Schiff made his career destroying people's reputations on live television until the day someone brought the receipts and turned his own playbook against him. It was supposed to be routine, FBI Director Patel's first appearance before the House Judiciary Committee since his confirmation. The Democrats, led by now Senator Adam Schiff, who'd strategically positioned himself for this moment, had prepared their questions for weeks. They'd leak some to friendly media outlets beforehand, coordinate with cable news for maximum coverage, and spend 3 hours making Patel look like a partisan hack. Standard Washington theater, Schiff had perfected this performance art over years. He'd sit there with that expression, the one that said he knew terrible secrets but was too principled to share them all. He'd ask questions designed not to elicit information, but to create sound bites. He'd mastered the pregnant pause, the knowing look to the camera, the implication that lingered even after the answer proved innocuous. But something went wrong exactly 47 seconds after Chairman Jim Jordan gave the hearing to order. Patel didn't wait for the first question. He set down a briefcase, a large old-fashioned leather briefcase that landed on the witness table with a heavy thunk that echoed through the chamber. Then he pulled out a stack of documents approximately 6 in thick, bound with official FBI evidence tags, and smiled at Adam Schiff with the kind of smile that makes defense attorneys reach for their billing calculators. "Mr. Chairman," Patel said, his voice carrying that distinctive blend of prosecutorial precision and barely contained satisfaction. "Before we begin today's hearing about the FBI's current operations, I believe the American people deserve answers about the FBI's past operations, specifically operations that certain members of this committee not only knew about, but actively encouraged, participated in, and then lied about. With your permission, I have some questions for Senator Schiff." The room exploded. Schiff's face went from smug confidence to confusion to anger in about 3 seconds. Democrats shouted about procedure. Republicans grinned like cats who'd just discovered the cream was unguarded. And Jordan, fighting back a smile, banged the gavel for order. "Director Patel," Jordan said, "this is highly irregular. So was using the FBI to investigate a presidential candidate based on opposition research paid for by his opponent." Patel replied calmly. "But here we are." The gallery erupted in applause. Jordan let it run for a moment before restoring order. "Director, you have the floor." What happened next in this narrative is framed as the most explosive congressional hearing since Watergate. If you think political theater can't get better than this, buckle up. Patel arranged his documents with careful precision, like a poker player organizing a royal flush. He looked up at Schiff with an expression of professional courtesy that somehow managed to be more devastating than open hostility. "Senator Schiff, for years you sat in this very room and told America you had evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. I've read the transcripts, all 57 of your television appearances on the subject during the investigation. You used the word evidence 200 times. That's a lot of evidence, so I brought some too." He patted the stack of documents. Schiff shifted in his seat. "Let's start with the basics," Patel continued. "You served as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee from 2019 to 2023, but you were ranking member before that with access to the same classified briefings. You heard testimony from 57 witnesses in closed sessions, Obama administration officials, intelligence community leaders, diplomats, FBI agents, everyone involved in Crossfire Hurricane and the broader Russia investigation. Patel pulled out the first document. This is the transcript of Clapper's testimony. James Clapper, former Director of National Intelligence. He testified under oath in a classified session on July 17, 2017. You were there, page 47. I'll read his exact words. I never saw any direct empirical evidence that the Trump campaign or someone in it was plotting or conspiring with the Russians to meddle with the election. He let that hang in the air before pulling out another document. This is Samantha Power, former UN ambassador, March 2017, page 23. I am not aware of any evidence of collusion, and you were at that hearing too, Senator. Another document followed. Susan Rice, former National Security Advisor, September 2010, page 61. I saw no evidence of collusion. You asked her direct questions about this, Senator. She said no evidence, under oath. Patel was building a rhythm now, document after document appearing like cards from a deck. In this telling, the pattern keeps landing on the same word, no evidence. He looked up and tightened the contrast. But here's what's interesting. After each of these classified hearings, where you heard testimony under oath that there was no evidence, you went on television. Let me show you. Patel nodded to a staffer who started a video montage. Schiff appeared on screen, March 2017 on Meet the Press. I can tell you that there is more than circumstantial evidence of collusion. Cut to May 2017 on CNN, the evidence continues to mount. July 2017 on MSNBC, I've seen evidence that goes beyond what's public. In December 2017 on ABC, there's clear evidence on the issue of collusion. The video ended, and the narrative leans hard into the whiplash. Witnesses under oath saying one thing, Schiff on TV saying the exact opposite, sometimes on the same day. You heard testimony under oath that there was no evidence, Patel said quietly. Then you went on television and told the American people you had seen evidence. That's not a mistake, Senator. That's not a misunderstanding based on classified information you couldn't share, because I'm the FBI director now. I've read every classified document you read. I've seen every intelligence assessment you saw. There's nothing there. There never was. Schiff's face had gone red, and in this account, he tried to push back by suggesting he had access to intelligence that suggested coordination. Patel cut in, and the story frames it like a blade. Show me. I'm the FBI director. I have access to everything you had access to. Show me one. One piece of intelligence that suggested coordination. Point to one document. Name one witness. Give me one piece of evidence that justified you going on television 234 times to tell America you had proof of collusion. Silence. You can't, Patel said, because it doesn't exist. It never existed. You lied to the American people for 3 years, damaged a presidency, divided the country, and you did it knowingly. That's not political spin, Senator. That's fraud. And Patel was just warming up. Hit that share button. This gets so much better. Part 2. Patel walked back to his briefcase and pulled out a new section of documents. These were marked with bright orange classified document covers that had been stamped declassified in large letters. The visual impact, in the way this story is told, was deliberate. These were secrets being exposed. Senator Schiff, you've been very concerned about leaks over the years. You've held hearings about them, called them a threat to national security, demanded investigations, and I agree completely. He smiled that dangerous smile. So let's talk about your leaks. Schiff's attorney, yes. He'd brought an attorney to what was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing, leaned forward to whisper something. Schiff waved him off, but his confidence was cracking. Phone records, Patel said simply, holding up a thick document. These are phone records from your official congressional phone and your personal cell phone, obtained through proper legal channels and recently declassified specifically for this hearing. They're fascinating reading, he said. And then he opened to a tabbed page. January 23rd. You attended a classified briefing about the FISA application process at 1:00 a.m. 47 minutes later, you called a Washington Post reporter. That afternoon, the Post published a story containing information that was discussed in that morning's classified briefing. Information that could only have come from someone in that room. Patel flipped pages and kept the cadence tight. February 8, 2018, classified briefing about intelligence sources at 2:00 p.m., 63 minutes later. You called a New York Times reporter. Next morning, the Times runs a story with details from that briefing. He pulled out a timeline that, in this telling, is meant to land like a hammer. March, April, May, June, 23 separate instances over 2 years where you attended a classified briefing and within hours, sometimes within minutes, called a reporter, followed by a story containing classified information. 23 times, Senator. These are circumstantial, Schiff began. I'm not done, Patel said. Phone records alone might be circumstantial, but we also have text messages. He held up another document. These are text messages between your staff members and media contacts. They were using Signal, probably thought they were safe. They weren't. Patel read from the document. January 25, 2018, your communications director texts a CNN producer, "Boss will have something good for you after the Schiff session tomorrow." Next day, CNN breaks a story about classified testimony. March 12, 2018, your chief of staff texts an MSNBC reporter, "Major development in committee tomorrow. Stand by for deep background afterward." The story runs that evening, with information discussed in that closed session. Patel set down the messages and picked up an official-looking report. This is an Inspector General investigation into unauthorized disclosures from the House Intelligence Committee during 2017 and 2018. It was completed but never released publicly until now. The IG traced 12 major leaks of classified information directly to your office, not to your party, not to the committee in general, to your office specifically. He flipped through pages and emphasized the mechanics. Metadata analysis, electronic surveillance authorized by FISA courts, and good old-fashioned detective work. Every leak traced back to your office, your phones, your staff, sometimes you personally. Schiff's face had gone from red to pale, and he tried to say the Inspector General never accused him. The Inspector General couldn't prosecute you, Patel interrupted. That's not their job. Their job was to investigate and refer. They referred to DOJ, which declined to prosecute. Want to know why? Patel pulled out another document. This is a memo from the DOJ Public Integrity section explaining why they declined. Quote, "Given the subject's position in Congress and the political sensitivities, prosecution would be extraordinarily difficult despite strong evidence." Translation: You were too powerful to charge. Patel walked closer, and the narrative frames this as a turning point. Senator, you're not Intelligence Committee Chairman anymore. You're a freshman senator, and I'm the FBI director. Things have changed. He held up the phone records again and tightened the vise. You leaked classified information to damage a sitting president. That's 18 U.S. Code Beer 798, unauthorized disclosure of classified information. It's a felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. But you knew that already, didn't you? Because you're a former prosecutor, you prosecuted people for this exact crime. You knew exactly what you were doing, and you did it anyway because you thought you were untouchable. "I never leaked classified information," Schiff said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your phone records say otherwise," Patel replied. "The text messages say otherwise. The metadata says otherwise. The IG investigation says otherwise. And, Senator," Patel leaned on the witness table, "I'm the FBI director. When I say you leaked, I'm not speculating based on anonymous sources. I'm reading from an investigation file with your name on it. A file I'm referring to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Schiff's attorney was writing frantically. Democrats on the committee looked shell-shocked. Republicans looked like Christmas had come early. The room stayed quiet long enough for Patel to deliver the line, "This story wants to be unforgettable. Keep watching. It gets worse for him." Patel returned to his briefcase with the careful deliberation of someone who'd organized his evidence for maximum impact. He pulled out 2 documents and held them up side by side like a teacher with visual aids. "Let's talk about your famous memo, Senator. Part 3, February 2018. You remember the one you said corrected the nun's memo about FISA abuse. I've got both memos here, and I've got something better. The underlying documents they were both based on. Let's compare them, shall we?" He set them on the desk, arranging them so the cameras could see. The Nunes memo made several key claims, and Patel recited them like an indictment. First, that the FBI used the Steele dossier as a basis for the FISA warrant on Carter Page without telling the court it was paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Your memo said this was false, that the FBI was transparent about the dossier's origins. Patel pulled out a thick report. This is the Inspector General Michael Horowitz's report on FISA abuse. You remember it came out in December 2019, about 22 months after your memo. Page 14, I'll read it. The FBI did not inform the FISA court that the Steele dossier was funded by a political opponent. Senator, Patel said, the IG confirmed Nunes was right. You were wrong, or more accurately, you were lying. He flipped pages and kept the drumbeat. The Nunes memo claimed the FBI didn't verify the dossier before using it. Your memo said the dossier was corroborated. IG report page 47. The FBI had not corroborated the Steele reporting used in the FISA applications. Strike 2, Senator. Nunes said the FBI relied primarily on the dossier for the warrant. You said that was misleading, that there was substantial other evidence. IG report, page 92. The Steele reporting played a central role in the applications. Strike 3. Patel pulled out a chart showing 17 specific claims from Schiff's memo side by side with findings from the IG report. And in this account, every single line is meant to contradict Schiff. Every single one vindicated Nunes. But here's what really bothers me, Patel said, his voice taking on an edge. You didn't write your memo in a vacuum. You had access to the same underlying documents the IG eventually reviewed. You knew that the FBI hadn't told the FISA court about the dossier's funding. You knew it wasn't verified. You knew it was the central piece of evidence, and you wrote a memo claiming the exact opposite. He held up an email, partially redacted, but with key portions visible. This is an email from your staff counsel to you dated February 3, 2018, 3 days before you released your memo. The underlying FISA application shows significant reliance on the Steele material without adequate disclosure of its political origins. We should consider whether the Nunes characterization is more accurate than we'd like to admit. You got this email, Senator, you read it, then you released your memo anyway. Schiff gripped the table and tried to say the email was taken out of context. The context is you were warned your memo was false and you released it anyway, Patel fired back. You used your authority as Intelligence Committee Chairman to publish an official congressional document that you knew was false. You stamped it with the seal of the House of Representatives. You held a press conference went on every network that would have you, and told America the Nunes memo was lies and your memo was truth. Patel pulled out another document. This is view counts and social media analytics. Your memo was downloaded 3.4 million times. It was cited in 273 news articles. It was referenced in 19 opinion pieces defending the FBI's conduct. You created a false narrative that infected the entire media ecosystem, Patel said. When the IG report came out and proved Nunes was right about everything, did you apologize? Did you issue a correction? Did you go back on TV and tell America you'd been wrong? He waited, and Schiff said nothing. No, you pivoted, Patel continued. You started talking about how the IG found problems on both sides. You claimed vindication based on the fact that the IG said the investigation was properly predicated, which wasn't even what your memo was about. You lied, got caught, and then lied about the lie. Patel held up the IG report like a Bible. This report is 478 pages long. It documents 17 significant errors and omissions in the FISA applications, 17, and every single one cut in the same direction against the Trump campaign. The IG used words like serious failure and misconduct, and your response was to claim the report vindicated you. You wrote a fraudulent memo to protect a fraudulent investigation, Patel said, and the story keeps its camera trained on Schiff as if the verdict is already written. You used your institutional authority to lie to the American people about the biggest political scandal in modern history. That's not a policy disagreement, Senator. That's not a different interpretation of facts. That's deliberately creating false evidence and passing it off as truth. The IG report showed problems, but ultimately found Schiff tried, and Patel rolled over him with, "The IG report eviscerated your memo point by point." Patel walked back to his briefcase and pulled out a new section of documents. These were marked with bright orange classified document covers that had been stamped declassified in large letters. The visual impact was deliberate, like a prosecutor laying out exhibits for the jury. In this story, it wasn't just paper. It was a message that the curtain was coming down. Senator Schiff, you've been outspoken about leaks for years, Patel said. You've held hearings, demanded investigations, and called leaks a national security threat. And I agree with you. Completely. He gave that small, sharp smile that looks polite until you realize it isn't. So, let's talk about your leaks. Schiff's attorney leaned in to whisper, and Schiff waved him off. But the confidence was already thinning. Phone records, Patel said, holding up a thick document. These are phone records from your official congressional line and your personal cell, obtained through legal process and recently declassified for this hearing. They're a pretty revealing read. January 23, 2018, you attended a classified briefing about the FISA application process at 1000 a.m. 47 minutes later, you called a Washington Post reporter. That afternoon, the Post published a story containing details discussed in that morning's classified session, details that could only have come from someone in that room. Patel turned another page without rushing, like he wanted the cameras to catch every motion. February 8, 2018, classified briefing about intelligence sources at 2:00 p.m. 63 minutes later, you called a New York Times reporter. The next morning, the Times runs a story carrying information from that briefing. He lifted a timeline board and let the pattern do the talking. March, April, May, June, 23 separate instances over 2 years where you attended a closed classified session and then, within hours, sometimes within minutes, contacted a reporter. And then a story would appear containing information from that session. 23 times, Senator. Schiff tried to object, and the narrative frames it as an attempt to interrupt a closing argument. Phone records alone might be circumstantial, Patel said, but that's not all we have. We also have text messages. He held up another document, thick, tabbed, and built to look unimpeachable on camera. These are text messages between your staff and media contacts. They used Signal, probably thinking that was a moat. It wasn't. Patel read from the page, keeping his voice calm, almost bored, as if the facts were doing all the damage for him. January 25, 2018, your communications director texts a CNN producer, "Boss will have something good for you after the Schiff session tomorrow." The next day, CNN breaks a story that tracks what was discussed in the closed session. March 12, 2018, your chief of staff texts an MSNBC reporter, "Major development in committee tomorrow. Stand by for deep background afterward." That evening, the story runs with details that weren't supposed to be anywhere near a broadcast studio. Schiff's attorney started writing fast, like he was trying to outpace the moment. Patel set the messages down and picked up an official-looking report. This is an Inspector General investigation into unauthorized disclosures from the House Intelligence Committee during 2017 and 2018. It was completed, but it was not released publicly until now. The IG traced 12 major leaks of classified information directly to your office, not to your party in general, not to the committee as a whole, to your office. Patel flipped through pages and punctuated each sentence with a quiet certainty that made it harder to dismiss. Metadata analysis, electronic surveillance authorized by FISA courts, and old-fashioned investigative work. In this account, every route leads back to the same destination: your phones, your staff, and sometimes you personally. Schiff's face shifted from anger to something closer to alarm, and he tried to say the Inspector General never accused him. "The Inspector General can't prosecute you," Patel cut in. "That's not their function. They investigate, they refer. They referred to DOJ, and DOJ declined to prosecute. Want to know why?" Patel pulled out another document and held it up so the cameras could lock onto it. This is a memo from the DOJ Public Integrity section explaining why they declined, quote, "Given the subject's position in Congress and the political sensitivities, prosecution would be extraordinarily difficult despite strong evidence." Then he translated it in plain English. "You were too powerful to charge." Patel stepped closer, but he didn't need volume. He needed gravity. "Senator, you're not the Intelligence Committee chairman anymore," he said. "You're a freshman senator, and I'm the FBI director. Things have changed." He lifted the phone records again, as if the paper itself had weight. "You leaked classified information to damage a sitting president. That's 18 U.S. Code Beer 798, unauthorized disclosure of classified information. A felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. But you knew that already, didn't you? Because you're a former prosecutor. You prosecuted people for this exact crime. You knew what you were doing. And you did it anyway because you thought you were untouchable." Schiff said, "I never leaked classified information, but it didn't land like a denial anymore. It landed like a plea for time." "Your phone records say otherwise," Patel replied. "The text messages say otherwise. The metadata says otherwise. The IG report says otherwise." "And, Senator," Patel leaned forward onto the witness table, "I'm the FBI director. When I say you leaked, I'm not speculating based on anonymous sources. I'm reading from an investigation file with your name on it. A file I'm referring to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution." The room went quiet so fast it felt staged. Schiff's attorney started writing frantically, like ink could build a wall. Democrats looked stunned. Republicans looked like they were watching a payoff they'd waited years to see. The cameras stayed trained on Schiff's face, searching for a recovery that didn't come. Patel let the silence sit just long enough to feel like a verdict. "Keep watching," he said. It gets worse for him. Then he turned back to the briefcase with the careful control of someone who had arranged every beat in advance. He pulled out 2 documents and held them up side by side, like a teacher about to grade a test in front of the class. "Let's talk about your famous memo, Senator." And the hearing, at least in the way this story is told, moved into its next phase. February 2018, Patel said, "You remember it well. The memo you released claiming to correct the Nunes memo on FISA abuse. I have both memos here, and I have something even more important, the underlying documents they were based on. Let's put them side by side and walk through them slowly." He laid the papers out so the cameras could see everything clearly. The Nunes memo made several central claims. First, that the FBI relied on the Steele dossier to obtain a FISA warrant on Carter Page without informing the court that the dossier was funded by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Your memo said that was false. You claimed the FBI had been transparent about the dossier's origins. Patel lifted a thick report and opened it deliberately. This is the Inspector General Michael Horowitz's report on FISA abuse. It was released in December 2019, nearly 2 years after your memo. Page 14, Patel read aloud, "The FBI did not inform the FISA court that the Steele dossier was funded by a political opponent." He closed the report and looked up. The Inspector General confirmed that Nunes was right. Your memo was wrong, or, as this record suggests, deliberately misleading. Patel turned another page without pausing. The Nunes memo stated the FBI failed to verify the dossier before using it. Your memo said the dossier was corroborated. Inspector General Report, page 47. The FBI had not corroborated the Steele reporting used in the FISA applications. Strike 2, Senator. Patel's voice stayed calm, but the cadence tightened. The Nunes memo said the FBI relied heavily on the dossier for the warrant. You said that was misleading, and that substantial other evidence existed. Inspector General Report, page 92. The Steele reporting played a central role in the applications. Strike 3. Patel lifted a chart and held it steady for the cameras. 17 specific claims from your memo matched against the Inspector General's findings. Every single claim contradicted by the official report. Every single one. But here's the part that matters most, Patel said, and his tone shifted just slightly. You didn't write that memo blind. You had access to the same FISA applications and supporting documents the Inspector General later reviewed. You knew the FBI hadn't disclosed the dossier's political funding. You knew it hadn't been verified. You knew it was central to the warrant. And yet you released a memo stating the opposite. Patel held up an email, partially redacted but unmistakable. This is an email from your staff counsel dated February 3, 2018, 3 days before your memo was released. It reads, "The underlying FISA applications show significant reliance on the Steele material without adequate disclosure of its political origins. We should consider whether the Nunes's characterization is more accurate than we would like to admit. You received this email. You read it. And then you released your memo anyway." Schiff tightened his grip on the desk and tried to argue the email was taken out of context. "The context is simple," Patel replied. "You were warned your memo was inaccurate. You released it anyway. You used your authority as Intelligence Committee Chairman to publish an official congressional document you knew misrepresented the facts. You stamped it with the seal of the House of Representatives. You held a press conference. You went on every network that would book you. And you told the American people that your memo reflected the truth." Patel reached for another document. This is the distribution data. Your memo was downloaded 3-4 million times. It was cited in 250 news articles. It was referenced in 19 opinion columns defending the FBI's conduct. You didn't just issue a statement, Patel said. You shaped the national narrative. When the Inspector General report came out and contradicted your memo point by point, did you correct the record? Did you apologize? Did you go back on television and tell the public you had been wrong? He paused. Schiff said nothing. No, Patel continued. You pivoted. You claimed vindication by pointing to language that had nothing to do with the claims in your memo. You reframed the findings to protect your position. You misled the public again. You lied, were contradicted by official findings, and then misrepresented those findings. Patel held up the Inspector General report and let it hang there. 478 pages, 17 documented errors and omissions, every one of them cut in the same direction. The report used words like serious failure and misconduct, and you told the public it cleared you. That's not disagreement, Senator. That's constructing a false record and defending it after the facts collapse. Patel's voice sharpened just enough to change the temperature in the room. You used your institutional authority to mislead the American people about one of the most consequential investigations in modern history. That's not interpretation. That's fabrication. Schiff tried to interject about broader context and competing conclusions. Patel didn't raise his voice. The Inspector General dismantled your memo line by line. There is no both sides here. There is a written record, and it contradicts you completely. He set the documents down carefully, as if closing one case file before opening the next. And that memo, Patel said, wasn't the end of the story. It was part of a pattern that didn't stop with Russia or FISA. And the next documents he reached for made that clear. Patel paused, not for effect, but to let the weight of what had already been laid out settle into the room. Then he reached back into the briefcase again, slower this time, as if the next section demanded its own gravity. Senator Schiff, he said, let's talk about the Ukraine whistleblower. The complaint that triggered the first impeachment. The one you told the American people you had no prior knowledge of. You went on television and said you did not know the whistleblower's identity. You said your staff had no contact with him before the complaint was filed. You repeated that claim on multiple networks, multiple times. So now, we have a simple question. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Schiff said he did not know the whistleblower's identity. Patel nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. That's interesting, he said, because the Inspector General of the intelligence community says otherwise. Patel lifted another document, already marked and tabbed. Let me read directly from the report. The committee received the complaint on September 13, 2019. However, the whistleblower contacted committee staff before filing the complaint and was advised by the committee as to how to file such complaints. That's not my language, Patel said. That's the Inspector General. Your staff met with the whistleblower before the complaint was filed. Patel looked up and didn't rush the next line. You went on television on September 17, 2019, 4 days after receiving the complaint, and you said, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower." That statement was not accurate. Your staff had met with him. Patel pulled out a timeline and laid it flat on the table. August 28, 2019, the whistleblower contacts your staff. This is confirmed by the Inspector General. Your staff meets with him. They discuss his concerns. They advise him on how to proceed. They help him secure legal counsel, not just any counsel. An attorney named Mark Zaid, who had publicly expressed strong political opinions years earlier. Patel didn't editorialize. He simply let the name hang. September 9, 2019, the whistleblower files the formal complaint. But here's where it gets more interesting. Patel lifted another document. This is an internal analysis prepared by the Republican minority at the time. It notes that the complaint uses specific legal phrasing, cites precise statutory language, and mirrors procedural frameworks uncommon in first-time filings. In plain English, Patel said, it reads like it was written by a lawyer, because it was. He then held up phone records. These are call logs showing 14 phone calls between your staff and the whistleblower's attorneys. 14 calls, all within the 2 weeks between first contact and the formal filing. That's not incidental coordination. That's sustained interaction. Patel waited, then added another detail. Just before this complaint was filed, a key requirement was removed from the standard whistleblower form, the requirement for first-hand knowledge. That change happened quietly. And according to testimony gathered during the Inspector General's review, your staff had inquired about that requirement shortly before it was removed. Patel did not accuse. He simply aligned the dates. Schiff attempted to object. Patel continued without raising his voice. Your staff coordinated with the whistleblower. They helped shape the complaint. They helped identify legal representation, and they prepared for what came next. Patel reached into the briefcase again and removed a printed calendar. September 13th, the complaint is received. September 18th, you write to the Acting Director of National Intelligence demanding its release. September 19th, the existence of the complaint leaks to the press. September 23rd, details of the allegations appear in the media. September 24th, the core narrative is everywhere. This wasn't organic. It was a rollout. Patel held up another document. This was recovered from a government-issued laptop used by one of your staff members. It was dated September 5, 2019, 4 days before the formal complaint was filed. The title was simple: Whistleblower Rollout Strategy. It included media outlets, suggested messaging, and a release timeline. You had a media plan before the complaint officially existed. Patel let that sentence sit. You didn't just receive a whistleblower complaint, Senator. You facilitated it. You shaped it. You coordinated its presentation to the public. And then you went on television and denied any prior involvement. Patel played clips on the monitors. We were not aware of the complaint until it was filed. The committee had no involvement in bringing this forward. We learned of it through the proper channels. Each clip ended, one after another. Every statement contradicted by documented records. Patel turned back to Schiff. Every one of those statements was false. The Inspector General himself raised concerns about the committee's involvement. He questioned whether the complaint maintained the independence expected of the process. That concern is documented. Patel closed the folder. You helped manufacture the complaint, Senator. You helped orchestrate its public release. And you misrepresented your role to the American people. That's not oversight. That's deception. And it wasn't the last time, either. Patel took a sip of water, not because he needed it, but because the room needed a breath. When he spoke again, his tone shifted from procedural to unmistakably firm. Senator, he said, let's talk about your opening statement at the first impeachment hearing. September 26, 2019. It was memorable. He gestured to the screens. Let's remind everyone what you said. The video played, Schiff reading from prepared notes, voice measured and dramatic. This is the essence of what the president communicates, Schiff said on the recording. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Patel stopped the video. That sentence, he said, does not appear anywhere in the actual transcript of the call. Not once. Not in substance. Not in implication. Patel lifted the official transcript. This is the real call. 30 pages. Released publicly. Nowhere does the president say, "Make up dirt." Nowhere does he say, "Listen good." Nowhere does he repeat himself 7 times. Those words were invented. You didn't summarize the call. You created a fictional version of it. Patel played more clips. Networks replaying Schiff's statement. Headlines reacting to what viewers believed were direct quotations. Polls conducted in the days that followed. A majority of respondents believed Schiff's version was accurate because it was delivered as fact, because it was delivered in an official hearing, because it carried the authority of your position. Patel let that sink in. Millions of Americans believed words that were never spoken. When challenged, Patel continued, "You claimed it was parody, at least partly parody. So let's examine that." He replayed the clip again. "Your tone was serious. Your delivery was measured. There was no indication you were joking. No signal to the audience. No clarification until after the damage was done. Parody is meant to be obvious. This was not. This was presented as the essence of the call. In the most serious constitutional process Congress can conduct." Patel's voice sharpened. "You fabricated language and introduced it into an official proceeding. That's not commentary. That's creating a false record." And it didn't stop there. Patel held up polling data. Even after your parody claim, a substantial portion of the public continued to believe your version was real. Tens of millions of people. That belief persists because you never corrected it clearly. You let the false version stand. You benefited from it. And the narrative moved on. Patel paused, then leaned forward slightly. If a federal agent did that in an official report, it would be grounds for termination and prosecution. If an FBI director fabricated dialogue and claimed parody after the fact, the career would end that day. But you did it on live television, in an impeachment hearing, and you called it a misunderstanding. Patel set the transcript down. You didn't misstate. You manufactured. You created a false account and placed it into the congressional record. That's not performance. That's deception under color of authority. Schiff attempted to respond. Patel didn't interrupt loudly. He didn't need to. The documents were doing the talking, and the room could feel the shift. This wasn't about interpretation anymore. This was about credibility. And credibility, Patel said, once broken, doesn't come back. He closed the folder and reached for the next set of documents, the personal ones. Patel straightened the stack of papers in front of him, aligning the edges with deliberate care. This part, he knew, wouldn't rely on shock. It would rely on record. "Senator," he said, "let's talk about June 21st, 2023, the day the House of Representatives formally censured you. Only the 25th time in American history that body has taken that step against one of its own. This wasn't cable news commentary. This wasn't partisan opinion. This was an official action by your colleagues." Patel lifted the resolution. House Resolution 521. It states that you abused your position as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, that you made misleading statements to the American people regarding alleged evidence of collusion. That language wasn't accidental. It was chosen carefully. Misleading statements is how Congress says lying without breaking decorum. 213 members voted in favor. Not pundits, not commentators. Elected representatives on the record. You called it a political stunt, Patel said, but a majority of the House voted to formally condemn your conduct. That's not theater. That's institutional judgment. Patel turned another page. Between 2019 and 2023, 18 formal ethics complaints were filed against you. 18. Most were dismissed quietly. That's how the system works when power is involved. But 3 were deemed to have merit. 3 resulted in private admonishments. We know this because the Ethics Committee is required to acknowledge actions taken, even if details remain sealed. Patel lifted a letter. Office of Congressional Ethics, March 2022. Probable cause to believe Representative Schiff may have engaged in unauthorized disclosure of information. That wasn't Russia. That wasn't Ukraine. That was January 6th. A different committee. Same pattern. Sensitive information. Media exposure. Leaks traced back to your orbit. Patel spread the documents out. Russia investigation. Ukraine impeachment. January 6th committee. Every time you were entrusted with sensitive material, it surfaced in the press. That's not coincidence. That's behavior. Your own colleagues noticed, not Republicans. Democrats. Patel read from internal statements, concerns about credibility, concerns about exaggeration, concerns about trust. Even allies acknowledged the problem behind closed doors. Your own institutions censured you. Your own ethics bodies investigated you. Your own party quietly questioned your judgment. And still, you present yourself as the moral authority in this room. Patel let the silence answer that contradiction. Then he gathered everything, every document, every exhibit, every timeline, and he stacked them into one pile. Senator Schiff, he said, let's talk about what all of this built for you. In 2016, you were a relatively unknown congressman. Then came the Russia investigation. Then came the media appearances. 227 cable news appearances between 2017 and 2019. 234 times telling the public you had evidence of collusion. A book, speaking fees, millions of dollars. A national profile, a Senate seat. Every step built on claims we now know were false, not disputed, resolved, investigated. The Mueller Report, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Durham Review, the Inspector General. All reached the same conclusion. No criminal conspiracy, no coordination, no evidence matching your claims. Patel's voice lowered. You didn't stumble into fame. You didn't accidentally become influential. You built a brand, and that brand was based on a narrative you knew didn't hold up. You raised $87 million on it. You earned millions more speaking about it. You sold books reinforcing it. You turned a hoax into a career ladder. That's not activism. That's monetization. That's converting public trust into personal advancement. That's fraud. Patel leaned in, not aggressively, but finally. You spent years accusing others of undermining democracy, of abusing institutions, of lying to the public. And now the record shows you did exactly that. The difference is this. When you accused people, you used implication, innuendo, anonymous sourcing. When I speak today, I'm using documents, phone records, emails, testimony, Inspector General findings, official votes of Congress. Patel lifted one final folder. This is a formal criminal referral from the Federal Bureau of Investigation to the Department of Justice. It recommends a full grand jury investigation, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, false statements, perjury, obstruction, abuse of power. It's being delivered today, not because of politics, because of evidence. Patel closed the folder. You came here expecting to control the narrative. You expected sound bites. You expected another performance. Instead, you met the record, and the record doesn't blink. The room stayed frozen. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted. No one spoke for Schiff. Patel gathered his briefcase. He thanked the chair, and he walked out. By the time he reached the Capitol steps, the clips were everywhere. Not because of spin, because the documents spoke for themselves. In Washington, power protects many things. But eventually, facts don't care who's holding the gavel. The hearing didn't end when the gavel fell. It ended when the footage started spreading faster than anyone in the room could react. Clips moved across platforms within minutes. Not because of commentary, because the exchanges spoke for themselves. Viewers didn't need a narrator. They watched documents held up to cameras. They heard dates, numbers, transcripts, and timelines read into the record. They saw reactions that couldn't be edited away, and they drew their own conclusions. By the end of the day, the hearing dominated political conversation, not as a partisan skirmish, as a moment of reckoning. Even outlets that tried to downplay it couldn't avoid showing the footage. The visuals were too clear. Supporters of Schiff argued it was political retaliation. Critics said it was long overdue. But the argument shifted away from tone and toward substance. People weren't debating style. They were debating records. Schiff issued a statement later that evening. It accused Patel of grandstanding. It claimed mischaracterization. It promised responses at a later time. It did not address the documents directly. That omission mattered. In Washington, denial is routine, but silence around specifics is noticed, especially when the specifics are written down, especially when they are already public. In the days that followed, former colleagues avoided the topic. Some defended Schiff cautiously. Others declined to comment altogether. A few admitted privately that the hearing had changed things, not politically, but reputationally. Trust, once questioned, doesn't return easily. Access becomes limited. Invitations slow down. The benefit of the doubt disappears. That process doesn't make headlines, but it's real. Patel, for his part, said little afterward. He didn't tour studios. He didn't celebrate publicly. He repeated one line when asked. The record is the record. The Department of Justice confirmed receipt of the referral. No timelines were given. No predictions were made. That silence carried its own meaning. Investigations don't announce themselves. Inside Washington, the message landed. Oversight cuts both ways. Authority magnifies consequences. And narratives collapse when documents replace rhetoric. That understanding doesn't fade quickly. For years, the Russia investigation defined an era. It shaped elections. It shaped media coverage. It shaped careers. And it shaped public trust. What followed this hearing wasn't vindication or revenge. It was something quieter, a recalibration. A reminder that claims age poorly without proof, and that power doesn't rewrite records. Adam Schiff's legacy will be debated for years. Supporters will emphasize intent. Critics will emphasize outcome. Historians will emphasize evidence. And evidence tends to be stubborn. The larger lesson extended beyond one man. Institutions survive when accountability applies evenly. They erode when it doesn't. That tension defines every era of American politics. This moment simply made it visible again. Truth doesn't announce itself dramatically. It accumulates, it waits, and eventually, it confronts whoever stands in front of it, prepared or not. In this case, The confrontation wasn't loud. It was methodical. It was documented. And it was recorded. Whether consequences follow immediately or slowly is a matter for the system. But the narrative itself shifted, from accusation to examination, from assertion to verification, from performance to record. That shift is hard to reverse. And once it happens, careers don't end with a bang. They fade under scrutiny, under questions that no longer go away, under answers that never come. In Washington, many things are forgotten, but transcripts remain. Votes remain, documents remain, and so does the public memory of when the record was finally read aloud.